Okay, here we go. This is NSCA, Essentials to Personal Training, Chapter 10, still talking about fitness evaluation, selection and administration, and now in presentation 3, we're moving into some assessment terminology, and then we get into the difference between reliability or the understanding, not a difference, but the understanding of the terminology, reliability and objectivity, as well as validity, which are kind of key in terms of exercise testing and understanding the results. So there's a number of factors that make a assessment correct or the right assessment. Was it reliable? Was it objective? Was it valid? Was the equipment calibrated and did it produce accurate results? Was the subject, the person physically and emotionally influenced by anything before the test that might have had an adverse effect? And then if there were specific testing protocols, were they followed carefully? And then was the data, or were the data, more accurately, collected accurately? So it becomes a matter of knowing if you're going to do fitness testing and do it correctly, there's a certain protocol that you have to follow, and you have to be kind of specific and kind of meticulous on how you implement these tests so you can have valid results. Let's jump it on over. So reliability. When we look at reliability, it's the ability to go ahead and implement a test and then implement that test again, and implement that test again, and implement it again, and measure the same trait in the same conditions over and over and over and over again. So what you'd like to have is consistency within a test. And the consistency, meaning your ability to administer the test and get the same results under the same conditions, means that the test itself is reliable. And there's many ways to kind of undermine and kind of undercut reliability in a test. But just think of, like, in terms of test consistency and some of the things you've done in your other classes, whether it's speed agility work, doing a 5-10-5, 40-yard dash, or we did body composition, medicine ball, upper body throws. There's different things you can start to look at and go, okay, where would I make mistakes in implementing this test with person A versus person B versus person C, or even with the same person? Where might I make mistakes with the same person and take away from the reliability of that actual test? So reliability it's tied to the test itself, don't get me wrong, but it's also tied to the person who is implementing the test and being able to do so with, if you will, very replicatable processes that increases the reliability. So it has to measure the same trait under the same conditions with no intervention. They get into validity. Now, it's in simple terms, it measures what it's supposed to measure. And the way I would describe this is, you might be able to draw a correlation between and a relationship between a person's leg press strength and the ability under 1 rep max under bench press. But those two things are generally considered mutually exclusive. One of them is a lower body exercise, the other one's an upper body exercise. And if you really want a test to measure upper body strength, to make that test or evaluation most valid, you would need to actually test what you're intending to evaluate, upper body strength. Therefore, the bench press would probably be the best in this scenario, the best exercise to use to evaluate upper body strength. So the relevance indicates how well the test matches the objectives of the testing. And by that, you look at this and go, okay, I'm trying to evaluate upper body strength, or I'm trying to evaluate body composition, whatever it may be. Relevance means the test itself has to basically tie into what you're trying to evaluate. Again, if you want to evaluate upper body strength, you probably wouldn't do a leg press for repetitions. You would probably do bench press for maybe a 3-rep max, for example. That would make the test very valid, and also make the relevance very high as well, which are two things you want when you're evaluating. Face validity, it just means that this is the test appears what it's supposed to test. So if we look at somebody doing bench press, then they're probably trying to work on upper body strength, and that's what we're stating that the test is that we're trying to evaluate, or the component that we're trying to evaluate is upper body strength. And so we have them do a bench press. It probably would look very appropriate to have somebody doing that exercise. You can make the argument if your trainer has the client doing push-ups that maybe it's not so much upper body strength, it's upper body endurance, but I would counter with the simple fact that some of the clients that you'll come across when you start in the personal training space, and even maybe to the athletic space, depending upon the age and their training age, they might not be able to do any more than a couple of push-ups. So in essence, a push-up might be an upper body strength, a way to evaluate upper body strength. And so it would meet reliability, validity, and it also has great face validity, right? Because it appears the test was supposed to test. Content validity, it has a little bit broader scope here. You're talking about when you read content validity, like intuitively you go, it's a battery of tests and it's all these different things that we should cover. But in essence, what you're looking at is we have a test and it's able to measure and evaluate all the things that it should. Upper body strength, perhaps we can even make the argument for shoulder mobility. And when you look at the ability to look at a particular exercise, there's different components to it, but the book references and makes note of the fact that with a volleyball player, it's not one-dimensional. And I would also say with a basketball player, a football player, et cetera, but for the example they're providing in the book is with a volleyball athlete, they should be tested on more than just jumping. They should be tested on a battery of different exercises or use a battery of different tests to evaluate skills specific to the sport of volleyball. With construct validity, it's used to differentiate between performance abilities, and I'll kind of read through this here in the book, and I'll try to paraphrase it best I can. It's a theoretical concept, meaning a test is able to differentiate between performance abilities. In other words, if a test is to measure sport skills, those were the relevant skills that should score better on the test than who take the test without having previously acquired the skills. Now let's go back to our volleyball player. We have a volleyball player who's played club and they've been U12 and they've been playing for their entire, athletic careers. If we test that person on a particular set of volleyball related skills, one would presume that they would test out higher than somebody who is at the same age, same height, same body weight, but has no experience playing volleyball. So the construct validity itself is saying a person who is being tested on a specific or very specific set of skills would perform better or score better than somebody who has not acquired those skills. So there's a certain amount of adoption and adaptation that goes to this, where you have to have a skills introduction and adoption process for a person to be able to score well and actually increase construct validity. With criterion related validity, we use of field tests that are correlated to lab tests. So what they're saying here is if you look at a laboratory setting and you do a series of tests to evaluate your client, you can use all that fancy equipment, or you can use field tests that correlate to the tests that you would do with the expensive equipment. And they have been statistically compared to each other, and they show that they are relatable. Meaning, when you do skin fold calipers and do them correctly for body composition, those results will be very comparable to perhaps hydrostatic weighing, where you have a correlation between those results because there is a wide and deep body of work and research that supports that. So you can feel comfortable once you become skilled enough to be able to do body composition, to be able to do skin fold calipers, and know that the results when you fit them into your nomogram or whatever tool you use will allow you to correlate with what would be a more laboratory-based result. They get into indirect and direct measures and kind of building off of the body composition example I just used. An indirect measure of body fatness would be hydrostatic weighing, right? Where you put the person in a harness, put them in a pool, and we evaluate how much they weigh once we put them in a pool. And it's because you have fat mass and fat-free mass. Now, we can evaluate a person that way, or we can wait until they pass away and we can do an autopsy. And I had a professor in college one time describe this. He goes, the most accurate way to evaluate a person's body composition is whole body grinding, which was just I remember sitting in class going, what? Where it's a process of whole body grinding, and then you use different chemicals to be able to actually erode away the things that don't matter, and then you can evaluate and measure and separate the body fat versus non-fat weight. Absolutely gross. But that's a great example of a direct measure. The end result is you no longer have a client. So for us in the profession, we'd rather use indirect measures and be able to do hydrostatic weighing or skin fold calipers to actually be able to evaluate a person's body composition without having such a permanent result in the other way, okay? So there's different ways to do these tests. They can be kind of like different field methods in terms of body composition, or they could be bioelectrical impedance or near infrared, as well as other interplanetary measures. So with that, I'm going to move on to the next presentation.